We built this machine to help address one of the issues we had before we get to the decorticator, which is the baling of the material. Traditional balers are designed to bring in something that's between 10 inches and typically 36 to 48 inches, but not so much 9 feet.
That's Andrew Bish from Bish Enterprises talking about the new multi-height hemp harvester. This is the Lancaster Farming Industrial Hemp Podcast. My name is Eric Herlock, and today I'm going to talk to Andy Bish about this new piece of equipment. Plus, we'll hear from North Carolina farmer Gary Sikes, who harvested his fiber crop just last week using this new machine. And also today I'm going to add a new segment to the show that I'm going to call Profiles in Hemp. The first installment of this new segment will be with Trey Riddle, formerly of Strand, but currently now the Chief Strategy Officer at IND HEMP in Montana. Hey everybody, so welcome back. Thanks for tuning in. Today is September 15th, 2021. I'm going to skip over the normal news nugget segment that I do and just get right into the interviews. I will give a shout out here though to our ongoing sponsor, IND Hemp in Fort Benton, Montana. So as you heard in the intro, our first interview is with Andrew Bish from Bish Enterprises and Hemp Harvest Works. I saw him down in Raleigh at the Southern Hemp Expo, and they had on display this new multi-height hemp harvester, and I really thought it was worth digging in a little bit and finding out more about it. So here we go. Andrew Bish from Bish Enterprises and Hemp Harvest Works. Welcome back to the Lancaster Farming Industrial Hemp Podcast. How are you doing today?
Great. Thanks for having me here today, Eric.
Yeah. So over the summer, as my family and I were driving around in our RV, we kept running into you and your brother Jacob, at all these cool hemp events all over the country. And then just last week, I saw you down at the Southern Hemp Expo in Raleigh, where you unveiled the latest piece of hemp equipment from Hemp Harvest Works. Can you tell me what that is?
Yeah, and I really enjoyed seeing you down there. It was a good opportunity to get people together right before harvest to celebrate the hemp industry. So what we did ultimately was we've been doing some different decortication techniques, and we built this machine to help address one of the issues we had before we get to the decorticator, which is the baling of the material. We've had some issues baling some very, very tall, long stalks. Traditional balers are designed to bring in something that's between 10 inches and typically 36 to 48 inches, but not so much 9 feet. And so this machine that we have is pretty simple technology in terms of how we're using a sickle. So nothing amazing in terms of our cutting edge. But what we've done here is we've stacked these sickles 4 high. And so we can cut as low as about 8 inches on the ground to as high currently with this particular unit is about 10 feet in the air, and then chop that material into sections so that it's not so long for the baler.
Okay. And then how big or how small can you make those individual sections?
So we can really do anything. Right now, what we've experimented, this particular one, we're experimenting with 24 inches. I do think that going longer is actually going to be helpful. I think targeting more of 30 to 36 inches is going to be where we land for most people. I do think there's some application for 24 inch, but I think for most people, 30 to 36 inches would be optimal.
Cool. So you talked about, you're sort of solving the problem of the decortication by cutting them at these different lengths. Is there any other problems that this machine solves, or any other, sort of benefit for the guys harvesting?
It does help with the retting process and the raking process. I mean, ultimately, most material that's going to be cut down for fiber is not going to even be used for fiber. And if it is, it's not going to be used for clothing grade fiber, which means a lot of the stocks are going to be retted out in the field. And if you understand the retting process, which is also ultimately a rotting process, the more often you have some sort of damage to the stalk, the more likely you're going to have that process occur more rapidly. So
Hmm.
we're not damaging the stalk incrementally throughout the sections, but by having a shorter section, we do allow it to ret a little bit more quickly. And then again,
Okay.
from a raking standpoint, some rakes can handle very long stalks, but a lot of rakes do not like really long stalks. So it makes it a little bit easier to do some of that raking.
Can you talk about some of the other specs of this harvester?
Yeah, speed. It's important to us. We work with large scale agriculture. That's typically been our place in the industry since 1976 when we started, and we're always looking at how to make things bigger and better. This machine, we've got the ability to cut 15 feet wide, which is not something that we've seen from anyone else out there. And that's going to allow you to cut a lot more crop quicker, especially since we're seeing ground speeds north of 7 mile an hour. We've been really happy with where we are at 7. We've ran some material through it at up to 9 mile an hour. And while I do believe that the machine is very capable of running 9 mile an hour, field conditions are going to dictate some of that. If you're hopping around, the faster you go, the worse that gets. So
Sure.
having some good field conditions can lead to some better results, but 15 feet wide running, at least 7 mile an hour and getting some pretty good feedback at that space.
How does that 7 mile an hour harvest speed compare to, say, other crops? How fast can you harvest corn?
So in good conditions, you'll run about 7 mile an hour in corn.
So about the same.
Yeah, so 5 to 7 mile an hour. If you've got a down corn situation, you're probably going to be running 2 to 3. And then we work a lot in sorghum, and we typically see sorghum harvested between 4 and 6 miles an hour. So we're very competitive
Okay.
amongst other crops.
All right. And that 15 foot, that's off to like the right side, or is that sort of?
Yeah, we're cutting off to the right side, so we do have to cut the around the outside of the field. And if you look at 7 miles an hour, what that equates to, if we account for about a 10% overlap, we're
Mhm.
looking at about 11.45 acres per hour is what that translates to
Oh, okay.
for a producer.
How about like power requirements or, hookup, PTO, anything you want to talk about there?
Yeah, 200 horse tractor would work great for this thing. We the most recent field we ended up harvesting, we used a Kubota 140 horsepower tractor, which was, for anybody that's a producer or a farmer, that equipment issues plague your life. So we started out with a couple 220 horsepower tractors at the beginning of the day, and through mechanical breakdowns of the tractors themselves, we ended up with a 140 horsepower Kubota. And while it worked, it definitely would have been a little bit happier at about 200 horsepower. And it is a heavy unit. We're
Yeah.
pulling about 13,000 pounds through the field.
Wow.
And so having a small tractor can definitely not help you if you've got any hillsides or anything like that, which mostly, this type of equipment's to handle rolling terrain and flat terrain.
Okay. These are like made to order. Like I could call you up and place an order, and then your team would build this and ship it out to me, or how's that process work?
Absolutely. Currently, we're right in the throes of harvest right now. So the reality is, if you called me today, we're probably going to be about 8 to 10 weeks out,
Okay.
just due to our harvest schedule. And then, I hate to bring up the supply constraints in the industry, but we are at the mercy of others when it comes to hydraulic and electrical componentry. And those lead times have been showing about 8 to 10 weeks. But yeah, we absolutely can build these on an as needed basis. We've thought about spec building some units, but the reality is, as we spent more time in the field, we want to make sure that we're getting the right unit to the right producer and matching that up with what they're going to do on the backside of it. So, again, talking about how many sections does a person need? Maybe you don't need to cut it 4 times. Maybe 3 times is going to be sufficient, and we can put those 40 inches apart. Or maybe you've got a particular need and you really need them 20 inches apart, and you need 5 sickles. So we're not limited in what we're capable of doing, other than we want to make sure that we are providing the unit that's going to match the grower's needs.
Okay. And then, so, where did this idea come from? I mean, you talked about sort of solving some problems before, but like, how long have you been working on it? Do you do the design yourself? Are you in the shop, with the welder putting it together, or like, I don't know, talk about the process of designing and building, if you can.
Yeah, absolutely. So where did it come from? Well, it came from some knowledge that we gained through decortication. One of the things that we had learned is that um, we produce through our decortication technology a long fiber, and when I say long fiber, sometimes we're in excess of 30 inches. However, if you're going for a long fiber, one thing you'll learn is that any nicks or cuts in the stalk damage that fiber, and then ultimately you're dealing with a reduced tensile strength, and you don't necessarily actually end up with a long fiber at that point due to the damage. So a couple years ago, I started looking at what are some ways that we could do this, and looking at some of the things that they had tried over in Europe. This seemed like a pretty viable option to simply straight cut the material to reduce the amount of damage happening to it. If you don't use a sickle, you're somewhat forced into using rotary mechanisms to cut. And the challenge with that, again, is the likelihood of scarring the stalk over and over and over is going to occur. Now, there's a lot of people out there, and as we move forward in the hemp industry, especially the stalk part of the hemp industry, there's going to be some people that just doesn't matter to, because they're not selling fiber, or they're not selling long fibers. They're maybe doing a micronized fiber, and they're micronizing the herd. And that I don't think that this particular device necessarily is the right tool for that particular application. But for people that are looking for fiber, that's where the idea came from. So now let's go into how do we design this. And you saw me all over the country, and it wasn't because I was following you around, although there were some moments in time that it appeared to be either you were following me or I was following you. But the reality is that's how I've learned what's needed in this industry. Is I travel, I go visit farmers, producers, processors, understand what the bottlenecks are and what the constraints are. And we came back, identified this particular constraint about the long fiber and how we needed to manage that. And so we just started looking at what are our options. I have a team of people here, a very talented group of engineers that quite honestly don't know much about hemp. And most of them, even though they've worked in agriculture, and here I've got a gentleman here that's been here for 25 years, couldn't run a combine to save his life. But he can draw stuff very well. He can design things very, very well if he understands what the concepts are. So sure. What I typically do is I bring the concepts to my team, and then they help me out by drawing the components, and putting those together in a 3D CAD system. We actually use SolidWorks here. Okay. And then once I can get a handle on a little bit about what they're thinking about from an engineering standpoint, then I can start bringing in some feedback, and collaboratively, we ultimately work to decide how we want to build that. And then once we get to the stage where we feel we've designed the parts, we do most of that work right here in house. Even though we're in a little tiny town of less than 400 people, we've got large plasma machines, we've got press brakes. And then we work a lot with sheet metal and tubing. So we can cut a lot of sheet metal, we can bend a lot of sheet metal, we can cut and weld tubing, and I've got a great team of fabricators that can take this information and then erect the system. Now, I don't do a lot of welding. I don't do a lot of cutting. But from an electrical standpoint, I did do a lot of the electrical work on this particular unit. We're a small team of people. We've got 20 people, so we help each other where we can. And
Sure.
my fabricators are better fabricators than I am. My engineers are better engineers than I am, but I'm pretty quick with wiring things electrically, so I help them out in that regard.
Cool. What does a machine like this cost?
So the way that we've got it set up right now, a person could expect to walk into a machine like this for around $80,000, maybe potentially 90 if you added a couple of features to it, but around 80,000. Now, if we go to some smaller units, we can get significantly cheaper. We built a single row, or a single sickle unit that was 12 feet wide, that we cut down 60 acres in Nebraska. And then a wonderful lady named Melissa at a company called South Bend Hemp used that to cut down her hemp in Kansas. And a unit like that would run just about $10,000. So that becomes very, very affordable
Sure.
In that regard.
Yeah, I that was one of the places I saw you was out there at South Bend Industrial Hemp in Kansas. So yeah, I met Melissa and her husband and her brother-in-law, the Baldwins, and yeah, that's great. This machine doesn't care what color the tractor is, right?
It really doesn't. What we're working with here is you need a PTO drive. We're using 1,000 series PTO or 21 spline. And if you got 200 horsepower, you've got a PTO on the back of the tractor, and you've got a 3-point, we can make this work. So if you're red, green, or blue, or even the orange Kubota, you're good to go.
Cool. And then am I correct in thinking that you did try this harvester out in North Carolina at Gary Sikes's farm?
Yeah, we did. We went out to Gary Sikes's farm and really had I guess as good of a time as you can have on a Labor Day holiday. But it was a successful day. Gary said that he had about 7 acres. I'm pretty confident Gary has about 20 acres of material out there that we cut down that day. and it was good. It was a nice test for the growers the first year that he'd done it. We saw some really neat material that was 15 feet tall, and then there was some shorter material in some areas that had some waterlogging issues, and some of that material was 3 feet tall, and obviously we've got too much sickle for that. But for the most part, we were happy with what we accomplished. We went through the field, and outside of a couple minor hydraulic leaks that we had to tighten some fittings on, the machine kept trucking until we got done, and then headed west.
Okay. Yeah, I was supposed to visit him. He was going to be our second stop on the hemp tour this summer, but because of some RV breakdown issues, we never got there. But I did meet him then for the first time down in Raleigh at the Southern Hemp Expo. And if all goes well, I'm going to be talking to him a little later today. So I'll get his side of the harvesting story too. But
yeah, and Gary, I've known Gary for several years. He's a great guy. He's really been an advocate, helped drive the industry in North Carolina. And then Gary's responsible for bringing in these extraordinarily tall genetics that we harvested on this property. So
right.
Really appreciate Gary being a part of the industry.
Yeah. And he works with you on the Hemp Feed Coalition too, right?
Yeah, that's correct. Gary works on one of our committees and has been a very active member in the Hemp Feed Coalition.
The work you're doing there is so important for the industry and for agriculture in general, in my opinion. So, yeah, thank you for doing that work with the Hemp Feed Coalition. I mean, just imagine the possibilities once those markets are opened up for hemp as a feed. Just the possibilities for livestock producers to add new sources of protein and whatnot into their diets. Farmers can have something new in the rotation, and like I said, like the hemp markets will just open up. So
yeah, it's going to be fascinating when we can work with this plant as the actual commodity that it deserves to be. rather than trying to fight through all the different regulations that they keep making it complicated to, get into farmers' hands and allow farmers to monetize appropriately. And more importantly, allow at the end of the day the benefits that everyone's going to receive from this plant, whether it be a lower cost protein, environmental changes from carbon sequestration, or again, just a different rotational crop that helps soil conditions, and where we are today, we need that so desperately.
Yeah, there's something in here for everybody. Well, Andrew Bish, is there anything else you'd like to tell us about the work you're doing, either with the harvesters or anything else that's on your mind?
I guess I just like to leave everyone with well, we built this machine because we think this machine's viable. We are a custom machinery builder, and if you've got ideas, we always like to entertain them. I like neat ideas. I like trying to do things different. I'm not the type of person. The longer you know me, the less status quo you'll find out that I am. I believe that trying things and failing is really how we learn and get better and further society. So if you've got an idea, if you've got a piece of equipment that you think is viable and you want to see come to fruition, reach out to us. I'm leaving at the end of next week to take a really revolutionary piece of equipment out to Oregon, and we're going to harvest hops. We're going to harvest hops in a way that hops has never been harvested before.
Whoa.
And I'm excited.
Let's hear about that. What's this revolutionary hop harvester all about?
Well, we worked with a producer out in the Oregon area, very long producer. They've been growing in the area since the late 1850s. And he's one of those guys that met me through the hemp industry, but ultimately had an idea, realized that we were people that like to embrace some of these unique ideas. And so we put together a couple different pieces of equipment that have been used in the hemp industry and turned them into one piece of equipment that ultimately what we're trying to do is eliminate the combine, the external combine. Most hops is harvested by taking a bine out of the field and taking it to an external combine. And what we're going to attempt to do is do the combining in the field, eliminating the cost of over a $500,000 piece of equipment, and then eliminating the use of 10 jobs that people really don't want. And that's really important because we're not eliminating good jobs that people want. We're eliminating very complicated, hard work jobs that just are not great for people to be doing at all. And right. We'll see how that works, and I'll get you some video, Eric.
All right, cool. Can you share any video of the multi-height hemp harvester?
Yeah, copious amounts of footage.
Okay.
I can get you pictures and videos. I'll work to get you a link to a folder, and then you can just pull whatever you want.
Okay, and I will put those on the show page for this episode at lancasterfarming.com.
Okay, fantastic.
Cool. Well, Andrew Bish, thank you once again for joining us here and for the work that you're doing in the hemp space.
Yeah, well, thank you, Eric. I really appreciate what you've been doing over the course of the past few years with this podcast. You've brought in a lot of education and shined the spotlight on an industry that definitely needs more spotlight shined on it.
Our next guest today is North Carolina farmer Gary Sikes. You heard in Andrew Bish's interview that he took this hemp harvester out to his farm in North Carolina, and they chopped some hemp on Labor Day. So I thought we'd check in with Gary Sikes and hear about his hemp operation and how that harvest went. Gary Sikes, welcome to the Lancaster Farming Industrial Hemp Podcast. How are you doing?
Great, Eric. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing okay, thanks. So, hey, I know you're on the road. Appreciate you taking some time with us. I wonder if you could give us a brief introduction.
Okay, sure. All right. So, from North Carolina. Speaking to you from Texas right now, but definitely a North Carolina native. Grew up on a farm and got back into the hemp business when it became legal in North Carolina in 2017 to be able to grow. And so we've been working on, we had a group of farmers to come together, form a co-op to help fund the hemp commission in North Carolina. It required $200,000 to be able to grow hemp. The commissioner said he didn't have the money for the program, and we raised 150,000 of that 200,000 by selling shares in a co-op. So that was a little bit of a history. It was kind of unusual. I don't know of any other state that had to do that the industry had to, fund the commission. But regardless, we were able to get that going. And from there, we met and decided, we're gonna grow together. We're gonna mitigate risk as much as possible. We bought a couple of containers of seed from Italy. That first year, we did just a very small amount of CBD in 2017, and that was kind of a fiasco. Most of those genetics came from Colorado that year. So 2018, there's a co-op. We reproduced some plants and kind of worked together to grow for CBD in 2018. And we also had to grow fiber that did not come through. So that part was a bust. And 2018 was kind of a bust, a year that CBD market really started to dry up. So if you didn't have a market in 2018, that was about it. So I knew at that point, I figured out in 2018 that there's only so much CBD that we can grow. It's overproduced, going to be, I saw what was coming. And so we turned around and I started working on fiber really, really hard. I've had an interest in grain, but I thought, well, I'm going to chase one thing at a time here, and we'll start working on fiber. In 2019, Timur Azur purchased a Fiber Track 660 from Corbett.
Mm-hmm.
And
at Formation
we
Ag.
grew 30, yep. Formation Ag, and we grew 37 acres for proof of concept.
Okay, cool.
So that we saw, we had generated a lot of excitement anyway, and we took that and grew a little bit again in 20. That was 2020, and in 2020 I brought in genetics for Bill Lebreski, and we tried that, and pretty much it came up beautiful, good germination. It was AOSCA certified seed, had a beautiful stand, got knee high and flowered, and that was almost a killer. At that point, that's what sent me on a search for genetics that would work in southern latitudes, and that ended up leading me to Australia. I knew some people were trying the Chinese genetics, but I brought in the Ecofiber's MS77, and we grew that this year, and did very, very pleased with it. Very pleased. We had some germination issues. If you didn't get it planted right off the bat, we did get into some germination issues. I think we figured that part out. We'll have that taken care of now.
Cool. Well, you were on my list of people to visit on the tour we went on this summer. You're going to be the second stop on our tour, but I guess God had other intentions for us, and we had a flat tire and we never got there. But the stand of hemp that you were going to show us turned out to be really good, right? Like you had some nice tall plants, yeah?
Yeah. So we're super excited. We had some plants up to 16 feet. We were a little inconsistent in places in the field where it grew. We only had the one field there that was 14. I think the entire field was 14 acres. Some of it got drowned out. We had a large part of rain, 8 inches of rain in about 10 days. And so a lot of it drowned out. But for the most part, what you've seen in the pictures was very, very good.
Yeah.
And I'm really excited that we've got something now that, yes, we proved. I'm pretty confident that we're going to be north of 10,000 pounds per acre on that area on that really nice patch.
Okay. So I was just talking to Andrew Bish, and he said he brought out his new multi-height hemp harvester, sickle bar mower out to your farm, and he cut some hemp for you. How did that harvest go back on Labor Day?
It went great once we got a tractor that would work with it. The first one had fuel. The second one, we finally got the third one and got out to the field with it. It was a little small. Andrew didn't think it would be enough, but it did a good job. Even in that big call hemp, I was very pleased with the machine and what it did. Andrew came a couple of years ago and sat down with me and asked me what we needed for the hemp fiber industry. I said, Andrew, we need a 3-tier harvester. If we ever get this to grow like it's supposed to, we got to have something to harvest that with. And so it worked great. I was very, very pleased with how that went.
Good. And so is it retting in the field now?
It is retting as we speak. That is correct.
Okay. And then what are you going to do? You going to put it in windrows and bale it, or what's the next step?
Yeah, so the next step will be to windrow it, and then we'll bale it. We'll let it ret. Once we feel like it's fully retted, we'll turn around and bale it up. And that is actually a certified organic grow.
Oh, wow.
And we had it sold before we ever planted, so we'll be putting that up in the barn until processing.
All right. Can I ask who bought it or what the end purpose is?
For this, it's going to be a fiber. I don't know that it's going to be textile grade, but we'll figure that out. That's a lot of what this was about. Is okay. What application with this genetics feel? Is it good? We'll be checking, see how well it is for a paper application.
Mm-hmm.
We got a couple of opportunities for paper. We'll be checking how well it makes polymer. We've got a polymer opportunity. And then we have some textile grade fiber. We'll just have to see how it works for that. I'm hopeful, but what I do know is we'll be able to use it for something.
Good.
That much we'll use every bit of it.
All right.
I'm sure of that.
So did you break even? Did you make any money? How did it turn out that way?
Well, we aren't finished yet, but at our, fortunate enough to get 30 cents a pound, and obviously in the areas that we yielded 10,000 pounds plus, or should yield 10,000 pounds plus, that's a $3,000 per acre yield. Yes, that's very profitable.
Yeah.
If we'd have made that over, I'm saying we might have 8 or 10 acres that we were able to harvest and that didn't drown out. And so I think we're going to be okay.
Good.
It was a proof of concept for sure. So that's going to be the closest. It's the first time we've broken 3,000 pounds per acre. So to go from a little less than 3,000 to 10,000, we're just super excited about that. It's going to be profitable.
Well, that sounds like good news to me. Congratulations. So what, you said you're in Texas now on your way to Dallas?
Yeah, I'm headed back to Dallas. I'm going to pick up someone, and we're going to ride down to see these genetics down in the Rio Grande Valley in Harlingen. So I'm really excited to see that grow. They planted a lot earlier, 6 weeks earlier than we did.
Oh, wow.
And so they hit 18 feet down there. And I'm really anxious to see the growth. Kind of an interesting environment down here. Their latitude, they can actually grow 2 crops a year. So they've already turned around and planted a fall crop.
Oh, wow.
So
That's
we're going to see how
fantastic.
that works. They're
Okay.
just testing that out. That's not something that'll work at our latitude in North Carolina, but
Yeah.
it is doable in southern Texas.
Right. Okay. Well, Gary, I appreciate you taking some time with me today while you're driving.
Absolutely.
I hope you travel safe, and we'll catch up with you soon. Thanks again.
All right. Thank you, Eric.
So things are changing here on the podcast a little bit. I'm throwing in a new segment today. Like I said, it's called Profiles in Hemp. And I guess you could argue that this whole podcast is sort of like Profiles in Hemp. But, I'm just trying new stuff. Anyway, I had the pleasure of talking to Trey Riddle from IND Hemp. Yes, they are one of our sponsors, but they are doing amazing things in the industry, and you deserve to hear about them. So here we go. Trey Riddle, welcome to the Lancaster Farming Industrial Hemp Podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well, Eric. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, could you give us a brief introduction?
Sure. Yeah, like I said, my name's Trey Riddle, and I am the Chief Strategy Officer at IND Hemp. I spent most of my time over the last year building our fiber decortication line, but I also support sales, marketing, and finance in the organization. My background originally is in engineering and specifically in polymer composites. So I've been in the wind industry, working on wind turbines. I've been in automotive, working on hybrid electric diesel powertrains. But for the last 8 or 10 years, I've been primarily focused in the natural fiber space.
Okay. Yeah, I was going to ask about, the background in mechanical engineering, and you sort of seem to be like a serial entrepreneur. How or why did you decide to get involved with hemp?
Well, interestingly, it wasn't by design, it was kind of by default. So I had a engineering company in Bozeman, Montana, and we primarily focused on polymer composite applications. So carbon fiber, glass fiber, things like that, helping people do product design or testing or analytics. And in that company, we developed some technology to extract fiber from the bamboo cane, so natural bamboo fiber. And our work was designed to use bamboo fiber to replace glass fiber in polymer composite applications, or to fill plastics, with biomaterials for biocomposites. And so that technology and those applications led us to realize there's a void in industry for sort of highly engineered or technical biomaterials. Mm-hmm. And that led to a spin-off company to then go into manufacturing of biomaterials. That company is called Strand, and we set that up in Louisville, Kentucky. Initially with just the bamboo fiber operations, but we began to bring on other agricultural and biomaterials like flax, kenaf, and spent distillers grains, agave, indigo, and hemp as well. That was in about 2015. Mm-hmm. And then over the next couple of years, we began to move from pure R&D to product and process development to pilot operations, commercial operations. And along that trajectory, kind of by about 2017, 2018, we were really seen as the hemp fiber company, and that's what people wanted to talk about. It was, hemp was all in the news because of the Farm Bill, and cannabis was in the news because of what was happening in Canada around, legal marijuana, a lot of buzz in cannabis. And we eventually sort of by default became a hemp fiber company.
Right. Did you ever go golfing with Mitch McConnell?
Industrial hemp.
I've never been golfing with Mitch McConnell, but I'll have to say that we, in Kentucky, we do, and really in the country, as far as the hemp industry is concerned, we do owe him some gratitude. He actually did do we organized a roundtable in Louisville with hemp industry members. Mm-hmm. And he came and sat for a couple hours in a roundtable and talked about the hemp industry at our facility in Louisville. And then he did a press conference at our facility in Louisville to raise awareness, along with our Commissioner of Agriculture, Ryan Quarles. It was a great event. And I told our employees, I don't care what your political affiliations are. Today, Senator McConnell is doing really good things for the hemp industry in our company.
Right. I think if people know your name, they know it with your, from your work with Sunstrand. Can you sort of briefly describe what happened to Sunstrand?
Sure. Strand, like I said, was formed it's actually formed in 2014, but really got going in 2015. And I like to say that we were building an industry, not a company. So at Strand, we had to do everything from identify genetics, develop agronomic practices, contract with farmers, develop processing and processing technology, develop products, go out and market them. So we were doing a lot, and we went both very broad and very deep. So we were doing, lots of work supporting conversion of raw hemp materials into things like ceiling tiles or insulation or matting. I mean, all kinds of stuff. But then also we were building facilities. We had a pilot line in Louisville is how we started. Then we actually acquired a pulp mill in Louisville. We built another pilot line in Alberta, Canada. Wow. We were building an industrial scale decortication line in outside of Louisville in Kentucky. We owned another one in South Carolina. We were doing seed replication in Uruguay. So we were doing a lot, and that was all in response to demand from industry. And part of that demand from the large companies suggested that, we needed to have a robust supply chain. And with a single source provider, it was going to be very hard to get those large contracts for the economies of scale.
Sure.
And since there really wasn't, other companies at that time doing it, we had to build more than one facility. So all those things just took an enormous amount of capital. And, we went into 2019 with I guess we started in 2018. No, I guess it was 2017. We hired investment bankers to help us raise. Originally, we were going to build one plant. It was going to be, $6 million, but investment bankers are like used car salesmen that came in. So you have such a good program. Hell, we can get you 20. So that's when we launched into that sort of multifaceted approach.
Okay.
And looking to raise $20 million that never came to the table. And we bootstrapped it with local investors for a couple of years, but come 2019, we were just doing a lot and kind of overextended. And we actually had, a couple, 3 binding letters of intent for $20 million investments in 2019, where the folks were just kind of shady or whatever and backed out. And after that happened a couple times, we weren't able to raise other capital while we were in those no chop clauses. So bottom line is that, we were overextended, and the capital never came to the table, and that forced us to, shut down because we were underfunded.
As you look at the current landscape of hemp in the U.S., what are the challenges that the industry faces, and what does the industry need to do to overcome these challenges?
Well, I think that we've overcome some challenges. There's still some issues, I think, from perception, and our regulatory framework has helped to dispel some of the myths between, sort of hemp and marijuana, but there's always an element of education that has to be done there for the, sort of the uninitiated
Right.
potential hemp user. That will continue on for quite a while, I'm sure. And sort of one of the pain points, I think, in the industry for providing that education and even that advocacy where needed, with issues like not being able to feed hemp to animals when we can
Right.
feed it to our children. Advocacy there is needed, but unfortunately we have a bit of a fragmented trade association scene, and we don't have really one strong unified sort of trade group. So that's one issue, I think, for the industry to grow is we need unity and, kind of a consolidated voice. I think that'd be helpful. So, we can push those agendas more efficiently and more professionally. But then the big issue always comes down to sort of the chicken and the egg around the supply chains. Right. It's a lot of cost and infrastructure to build oil crushing facilities and fiber decortication facilities. And it's difficult to do that without having contracts in hand. Well, it's hard to get contracts in hand if you can't make any material. So,
right.
There's bottlenecks all across that supply chain, from access to seed at reasonable costs, such that the economics work from the farmer all the way to the consumer, appropriate genetics for the region you're growing in and the application you're growing in, proper germ and availability, still some farming practices that have to be sorted out, limited processing capacity, primarily as chicken, the egg finance issues there. And then of course the market adoption is interested but slow because of those other issues. So,
Sure.
So coordinating the supply chain is probably the biggest issue that has to be done.
Okay. So are you from Montana originally? Did you grow up on a farm?
No, I'm actually from Louisville, Kentucky, but I did move
okay.
to Montana in the late 90s, worked as a welder fabricator on ranch equipment, and then went to school in Montana to start my engineering work.
Okay.
But I'm originally from Kentucky.
Oh, okay, cool. So in Montana, you all are building essentially the first large-scale hemp industrial complex in the U.S. Can this model be replicated in other states? And like, what mistakes have you made that other folks can learn from? Or what's your thought on the hemp industrial complex?
Yeah, so our goal in Fort Benton, Montana, is to develop what we'll call a kind of a hemp innovation campus, and we're well suited in a new industrial park. And the land that the decortication plant is on is about 10 acres, and there's some room for additional facilities. And then the oilseeds plant. So IND hemp is really food, feed, and fiber. The food and the feed, of course, coming from the grain. So which is an oil seed like flax or soybeans. The oilseed facility is just on a hill, kind of overlooking this industrial park. And so we really have two primary, what you can consider agri processors there. The primary processors that contract with farmers and bring in agricultural goods and then convert them to still value-added goods, but still raw materials for other manufacturers, food manufacturers or non-woven manufacturers to convert up another level in the value chain. And so the goal for this campus is to bring more industry members, to the table, to the area that can leverage these raw material supply chains that IND Hemp has put in place. And yes, I think that's a replicable process. As a matter of fact, or a replicable framework. I think that the combination of the grain and the fiber processing go hand in hand very well, because you can achieve lower cost of goods by essentially valorizing the stalk from the grain plants. And I do think that will be the model kind of going forward that everybody would sort of need to compete with for economics. So yeah, I think I'd like to see, a dozen of these types of facilities stamped out across the US or North America. As far as challenges go, the farming aspect, I mean, it's funny. I hear all these people talk about getting into the hemp game and one of their biggest sort of talking points is they got the best farmers in the union or as many acres as they want. Well,
right.
Well, that's all great that everybody says that everywhere I go, but the reality is it takes years to develop those agricultural supply chains. You only get, one shot for a few months out of every year. And so I think doing legwork for a couple of years up front is pretty critical to making the big investments in a campus like this. Mm-hmm. Then of course the financing becomes a challenge after that. But I think that's the big piece to kind of get going with in advance of embarking on a project.
Right. Okay. So I was there in Montana back in July, and you gave a tour of the fiber processing plant with that LaRoche decortication system. And it looks to me like you're having a lot of fun putting that together. So how much fun are you having, and when will this thing be operational? Yeah,
lots of smiles, a few head scratches, and a couple bloody knuckles. But it's really great. What's nice about this installation is it was a greenfield site. So we did the entire site design and building design, 52,000 square foot, 28 foot tall metal building. All was done specifically to house the 10 ton per hour decortication line that was going in it. So that was really pretty great. It's always difficult when you go into an existing site and you're trying to adapt it to your needs. Do you have the right ceiling height? Do you have the right layout for raw materials and finished goods? So it's been a lot of fun designing the building and then, the line. And we've been doing it at light speed, and we didn't even start this process until August of last year. So we're started pouring concrete in November, and we are now at the final stage of the installation. I mean, all of the equipment is, at least for the primary processes, there's some secondary value-added milling that's not installed, but all the primary process from bale opening to decortication to packaging, all that equipment is erected and installed. We are right now in the final stages of running ductwork and electrical. That's going to take a few more weeks. So we should start the commissioning process in, probably mid-October. That'll take a couple of months. So we'll be, fully operational, by the beginning of next year. We'll be making product the end of this year, but working through some of the kinks to get to, optimize throughput will take a couple of months.
Okay. What does that mean, like, to have it commissioned? Is it like someone has to come in and check it out, or like explain that commissioning process to me, please?
Sure. So we will get support, technical support for several of the equipment vendors, whether that's the air filtration system or the packaging line. They will send technicians up, and they'll help us turn the equipment on and train our people on how to do that. And they will ensure that we installed it. I mean, some of them already been out during the installation process, but they'll ensure the installation is correct and those systems are functioning properly. And it involves everything from just making sure the motors are turning the correct direction. And there are, I don't know how many hundreds of motors there are in the entire facility. This is a plant. It's a line. It has, 60 pieces of equipment. It's not sort of one magic piece of equipment. So everything from making sure the wiring works, the motors are turning the right directions, the software is communicating, the PLC, is communicating between the different systems, which include, the operator putting the bales into the bins, receiving the finished goods. You can't feed it faster than you can receive, the finished goods. So all those things have to be communicated. But the bulk of it will be spent in sort of debugging and, finding the kinks in the software, PLC, finding issues where we might not have enough air velocity or whatever to transfer the material and have to make some modifications on the fly. So we'll work through bottlenecks, and then we'll start working more on process optimization. This first half of the month will be, first month will probably be bottlenecks. Second month or so will be kind of fine tuning to get the material quality out of the back end by adjusting settings on the machines. Okay. One of the big issues is inability to bring technicians in from out of the country right now with the COVID immigration regulations. And so that could really cause a problem. The process to take a lot longer if we have to basically do a lot of this on FaceTime and email, with technicians in Europe.
Sure. Can you give me a sense, like in acres grown, what full capacity of that plant would look like?
Yeah, it will vary a little bit depending on the balance between, grain or dual purpose acres where we harvest the grain and the stalk, and then purpose grown fiber acres where we plant genetics specific for fiber and on an agronomic practice specific for fiber. So it'll depend a little bit on the breakdown, but we'll probably be in that 25,000 acre range to fill both the the oil seed side, the food and feed side, and the fiber side.
Cool. What else would you like to tell me, either about the work you've done over the course of your career or the work you're doing now at IND, or just thoughts on the hemp industry in general?
Well, I think it's an exciting time, for those of us that have been in the industry for a while. We've sort of been carrying the banner and beating the drum, and I feel like we're, 2022 may be a good critical mass year, where, some of these other facilities will have, come online, including ours, and the industry as a whole in the U.S. should have some pretty significant momentum in, become a more sustainable industry. Obviously, in the past, it's been almost completely dominated by CBD, and now everybody's really focusing on fiber and grain, and that's really exciting to me. That at IND Hemp, we don't do anything with CBD. Not that we have anything against it; it's just not part of our business model.
Right.
So I think going into 2022 is going to be a good year. I'm excited to be here. Still at it, and look forward to really focusing in the coming couple of years on a lot more on, vertical integration with brands and with upstream manufacturers. We spent a lot of time developing the raw material supply chain. Now let's really see what all we can do with these products.
Trey Riddle, thank you so much for joining me today.
You bet. Thank you, Eric.
Hey, well, that pretty much does it for the show today. Although I do sort of have a question or a favor to ask you. So let me give you a little background first. So the people at Lancaster Farming and Steinman Communications, they're starting to take notice of the podcast, and they think our audience should be bigger, right? Okay, fair enough. And how do we do that? So I have a question for you. What sorts of stories would you want to hear that would make you want to share this podcast with other folks, either in the industry or just regular people not in the hemp space? So think about that, because I would love to tell other stories. Do you think there's place here for non-hemp related stories? So talk to me, drop me a line, let me know what you think and how we can grow this thing a little bit more. Because I do love making the show, and I know that there's a bunch of you out there listening to our show. And I guess, the corporate overlords, they want more. Roar. And I'm giving it all I got, Captain. All right, so there is like an implication there that I sense that, if we don't grow it, they're going to kill it. And I don't want them to kill it, because I love making this podcast. So anyway, drop me a line. My name is Eric Herlock. I am the digital editor at Lancaster Farming Newspaper, the greatest agricultural newspaper in the world. You can always get in touch with me by email. Send it to podcast@Lancaster Farming, or just call me up, 717-721-4462. Leave me a message and I'll get back to you. But thanks again for listening to today's show, and until next time, I will see you in the newspaper. Episode 156 of the Lancaster Farming Industrial Hemp Podcast is copyright 2021 by Lancaster Farming Newspaper, which is part of the Steinman Communications family. Today's show was written and recorded, edited, and produced by Eric Herlock, and any music you hear throughout the show is courtesy of Tin Bird Shadow, including this ukulele piece of music, which is called Convalesce is More.